What's with all these back injuries and the offensive line depleted possibly going into Sunday? I still like the Lions' chances. Let's do a Friday night Locked On Lions.
You are Locked On Lions, your daily Detroit Lions podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for joining us, everybody, making us your first listen each and every day right here on Locked On Lions on the Locked On Podcast Network. Matt Dery with you on this a Friday night, September the 16th into Saturday, September 17th, a Friday edition of Locked On Lions. Detroit hosting the Washington Commanders coming up on Sunday afternoon. Lions still favored in this game. We're going to talk about that coming up momentarily. We got to get into what's going on in practice, and what's not going on in practice is a lot of healthy bodies along the offensive line. We got problems with injuries, no Frank Ragnow, and a back injury issue, which we got to get into as well. We'll talk about that coming up momentarily right here on the podcast as well. One of the national pundits that many of you don't like ripped on the Lions today. We'll tell you who that was today. And also, what's Vegas think of this game coming up on Sunday? We'll get into that as well. Again, Matt Dery with you. Follow me on Twitter at Dery Speaks, Dery Speaks, at Locked On Lions on Twitter, the Matt Dery Facebook fan page, and also we are right here on YouTube for those of you watching on the video side, the Locked On Lions YouTube channel. We thank you for watching that as well. Locked On Lions today is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. And we'll talk about BetOnline coming up momentarily on the program. All right, big news of the day. Lions taking on the Commanders coming up Sunday afternoon at 1 o'clock down at Ford Field. And today on the injury report, Frank Ragnow was deemed out of this game. He will not play Sunday due to a toe injury. Last week, you remember, Frank Ragnow injured his groin in practice, played well. It wasn't as great as PFF game, but the Lions' run game was pretty good. The Lions' offense put up 35 points, and Ragnow played in all 69 offensive snaps. Now, a toe injury, which he suffered in the game the other day, is going to keep him out of Sunday's game against the Commanders. You're talking about a Pro Bowl center, the glue to your offense, the middle of the offensive line, and Frank Ragnow will not play, ruled out today. I never liked that. Even when he was only about 80% with the groin last week, I always love when Frank Ragnow's out there. I think he is the Lions' best player. I truly believe that. I know, well, he's a center. Frank Ragnow is really, really good. Evan Brown will get the start in his place. You remember last year when Ragnow left and was done for the year with injury. Evan Brown snuck in there, and for 12 games at center, played very, very well. Hank Fraley made the comment the other day, the Lions offensive line coach, how proud he is of the depth of this team and guys like Evan Brown who came back. Evan Brown could have left this organization in the offseason and signed somewhere to compete for the starting job. He ended up staying, thank goodness, because he's going to play center coming up this weekend. Now, Jonah Jackson injured his finger in practice. What's with all these practice injuries? Practice? Jonah Jackson injured his finger in practice. And today, the Lions listed him for the game as he did not practice either today or yesterday. He is going to be questionable for Sunday against the Commanders. Now, if Jonah Jackson cannot play this weekend, the Lions, you remember, are already without Halapoulivaati Vaitai, who underwent back surgery. He's on the injured list. So Logan Stenberg, a Bob Quinn draft pick, former fourth rounder, played last week at the lowest PFF grade of any Lions player, offense or defense. He's at right guard. So who's going to play left guard? Tommy Kramer's on the injured list. We're going to get to that in a second. Vaitai's on the injured list. And now Jackson might not play. That leaves the following. The Lions could move Penei Sewell to guard, move Stenberg back to the left side, move Sewell to right guard, and play Matt Nelson at tackle. That's an option. The other option is to start either one of two men. Drew Forbes, who the Lions signed when the Browns cut him last week, or Coyote Owosika, who the Lions just signed off the Eagles practice squad this week because Tommy Kramer has a back problem and he had to go on the 4-game injured reserve list. What a mess. I still think they're going to win Sunday. I'm scared, just like you are. I have my worries about the defense, but I still think they're going to win on Sunday. But think about this. You could have a starting offensive line of Sunday, and thank goodness Chase Young is injured and out for Washington. My goodness. But you could have a starting offensive line Sunday of Decker, Owosika, Brown, Stenberg, and Sewell. Or Decker, Stenberg, we're going left to right. Decker, Stenberg, Brown, Sewell, Nelson. I don't want to see Matt Nelson. And I want to see Penei Sewell stay at right tackle. So those are the options. Jonah Jackson, finger injury, did not practice the last couple of days. And we're going to see if he'll be able to play in the game this weekend. Now, again, it's week 2. You don't want to really injure players. You want to be very, very careful. The Lions are at home. They're favored against a winning team, albeit it's a 1-point spread. But they're favored against a winning team for the first time since team with the winning record since 2018. But, man, what an absolute mess and a bit of a circus this is with all these injuries, especially along the offensive line. Now, Kyle Meinke brought up a very good point today at mlive.com, and he talked about how there's a issue going on with the Lions with back injuries. Quintez Cephas was the first one during training camp that missed time because he had a back injury at the start of camp. If you recall, that was a Cephas issue. Now, the following players, 4 players on the 53-man roster, are out with back injuries. Well, 3 to be exact. Halapoulivaati Vaitai had to have back surgery. Levi Onwuzurike, who's had back issues going back to his days, no pun intended, at Washington, he's out with a back injury. Tommy Cosmo Kramer, he's out and on injured reserve with a back injury. And now Amani Oruwariye, whom the Lions really need this weekend. I mean, we're talking about Curtis Samuel, Terry McLaurin, and Jahan Dotson. And Amani didn't practice today and was limited yesterday, and he's questionable as well this week with a back injury. I don't know if someone needs to question Kevin, the trainer. I don't know if something's in the water down at 222. But what's with all the back problems? You know, do the Lions need to be doing something differently? Like, what's happening here? Dan Campbell was asked about it today and said, quote, "It's a good question because you can't help but at least look at it and say, all right, are we doing something? Do we need to do something different? Is there something that we're not doing right? We're looking at everything, and there's nothing that I can think of right now that says we did something that we shouldn't have been doing." Again, Onwuzurike has a history of back problems. Maybe, and here's a funny joke for you, maybe being on Hard Knocks and actually carrying around expectations on your back has caused the back to have an injury. Only the Lions. Only the Lions have a back injury problem, and their whole offensive line is decimated by after one game. Oh, gosh. I hope Jonah Jackson plays. I really do. This is nuts. Absolutely crazy. All right, coming up next, a national expert, I'm going to use that term loosely, took a little bit of a shot at the Lions today. We'll talk about that, the matchup with Washington. It's a Friday edition of Locked On Lions. And the show today is brought to you by our friends at Turo. Turo, the world's largest car-sharing marketplace. With Turo, you can book any car you want, wherever you want it, from a community of local hosts. Browse a huge selection of vehicles for just about any occasion or budget across the U.S., Canada, and the UK. You can book a spacious SUV or minivan for a family road trip. Get a classic or luxury car for a special event like a birthday or holiday or even a wedding. Find affordable economy cars too if you're on a budget and just need to get from A to B. Test drive that new electric vehicle you've had your eye on to see how it fits in your everyday life. Many Turo hosts can even deliver the car right now to you. Every trip is backed by liability insurance. Terms, conditions, and exclusions apply. Ditch the boring rental cars and find your drive. Go to Turo, Turo.com. All right, so I'm driving around. Good story today. So I was up, as you've been noticing my backgrounds, I'm like on the go. I'm traveling all over the place for work, for personal, all of these things. So I'm driving today to another part unknown here at my new spot, my new hotel. And I was listening to Mad Dog radio. Usually on Fridays, I turn on the Valeni and Rico show. I hear them do the picks, David Hall hitting the drops, all that fun stuff. I was not in town. I was driving somewhere else. So I put on Mad Dog Sports Radio, Christopher Mad Dog Russo in the afternoons, and he had on none other than VSiN host and former NFL executive Michael Lombardi. All right, Mike Lombardi is a character. All right, the guy I think worked for Belichick for a while, like Scott Pioli, and I think he was a GM. Wasn't Mike Lombardi a GM? It was a disaster. Now he makes picks on the Mad Dog show in the afternoons with Christopher Russo, Mad Dog Unleashed or whatever they call it. We're talking to Michael Lombardi. This is Christopher Russo. Go ahead. What do you think about that? Like whatever, if you listen to the show. And so they're going through the picks today, and they're going through the 5 plays that Lombardi likes. And he says today, I'm taking the Commanders. And I'm like, this ought to be good. And he says, quote, Detroit shouldn't be favored against anybody. That defense is so bad. End quote. And I'm like, wow, all right. A little bit of a shot at the Lions, who have been America's team, who have been very popular the last few weeks. Only were 4.5, 3.5 point underdogs last week to the Eagles. Then the number jumped up to about 5.5 at the end. Lions covered last week against the mighty, the vaunted, the future NFC East champions, the Eagles. The Lions were right there and losing by 3 for a late backdoor cover. But Lombardi just taking a shot. Like the Lions shouldn't be favored against anybody. Hold on a second. If the Detroit Lions were going to be playing Jacksonville or the Bears, and I know the Bears won last week, so whatever. Houston. I mean, there are some bad teams in the NFL. There are some. The Jets. The Jets are horrible. They had Joe Flacco starting this past week. The Lions would be favored. The Lions are not that bad. Are the Lions good? I don't know. I don't think so. I think they're going to be better. They're not a good team, and they got to win this week. But to say they shouldn't be favored against anybody because that defense is so bad, we're going to find out Sunday how bad this defense is. Because last week they faced a quarterback, and I watched the game 3 times. Jalen Hurts made some Superman-like plays. All right, Aiden Hutchinson didn't have a good game. But his PFF grade was in the high 50s, low 60s because he got in there sometimes. He just couldn't finish. It's not like the kid was nowhere to be found. All right? We're going to find out this week how bad this defense is or if this defense has gotten better. A lot of pressure is being put on Aaron Glenn, Aubrey Pleasant, Todd Wash, Kelvin Shepard, all those coaches. Because it is time to not be surrendering 30-plus points again. Dan Campbell defenses, Aaron Glenn defenses have given up 30-plus 8 times already in 2 years. That's not going to win you any games. There's no Jalen Hurts this week. I know I've been dogging on some of the Washington podcasts and then our crossover yesterday where we were on yesterday's show talking. I'm not a Carson Wentz fan. I don't think he's that good. If Carson Wentz were really good, wouldn't Philly have kept him as he had like a near MVP season a few years ago? What about Indianapolis? Desperate for a quarterback. Carson Wentz had a good game last week, but Carson Wentz also did throw 2 picks. All right? He's careless with the football. And you know what he's hearing. Got to get it to your big 3 receivers. Got to throw it outside. He was doing a lot of dinking and dunking last week to Antonio Gibson out of the backfield. He was playing sort of that J.D. McKissick role, Theo Riddick Picasso role. You know who you are. And the talk in D.C. is they've got to get the ball to Terry McLaurin, Curtis Samuel, and Jahan Dotson more. Now, Dotson caught 2 touchdowns last week for a rookie in 1 game. That's tremendous. But Lombardi took a shot at the defense. Fans are not willing to say if this defense looks better. And again, there's some injuries and other things. And obviously, Onwuzurike, Romeo Okwara, Josh Paschal. If Amani doesn't play this week, I mean, there's some injuries there. But every team's got them. The Lions cannot let Carson Wentz and Antonio Gibson clown them this week. Receiving core is good, no question. McLaurin's a beast, all right? He might get off a little bit, but the Lions defense, they can't do this again. They can't give up 38 points. This is the Commanders we're talking about here. They're not playing Justin Herbert and the Chargers. They're not playing Tom Brady and the Bucks. All right, this isn't Derek Carr and Devontae. This isn't Aaron Rodgers. I want to see more from the defense. Does Gibson worry me a little bit out of the backfield and all the touches he gets? Yes. Is that 3-headed monster receiver worry me? Sure. Logan Thomas, a tight end, former Lion, pretty good player. All that does. But get to Wentz. Get in his grill. Make him throw under duress. And I think the Lions have a good chance, regardless of all these injuries. All right, Las Vegas update. I'm going to give you that coming up next from our friends at BetOnline. Hey, betonline.net is your number one source for all your pro and college football betting needs and sports info this season. Find all the latest football league developments, game matchups, news, and podcasts, including this year's opening week games. And of course, now we're in week 2, so let's do it. Want to put some money down? Maybe you bet on that Chiefs and Chargers game last night. It was a really good game. But the best place to go to get all the information is betonline.net. They are your continued source for all your sport wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores. The fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite sports and events, including Major League Baseball. How about the Tigers helping my Guardians tonight? All right, fellas, you suck, but thank you. MMA, boxing, and golf. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, so at the start of the week, a lot was made about the Detroit Lions being favored for the first time in a game since 2020. And they're favored against a team with a winning record for the first time since 2018. BetOnline opened the Detroit point spread against the Washington Commanders at 2.5. The spread now is down to 1. The latest lines coming from, again, BetOnline. The Lions are favored by 1, with the over-under set right now at 48.5. So you look at some of the other numbers and some of the other point spreads and some of the other over-unders. Lions and Commanders appears to be, they're looking at a 25-24, 24-23 type of game. If the line is at 48.5. The Lions, I think, are going to be able to run the football this coming weekend. We talked about it early in the week. Let's say it one more time. Jacksonville and James Robinson and company, they averaged around 6 yards a carry last weekend. Didn't run the ball a lot and ran for over 100 yards against the Commanders' defense. Jalen Davis, one of their young linebackers, has been called out. Everybody is saying that he struggles right now covering receivers out of the backfield or running backs out of the backfield. DeAndre Swift needs to get more touches. Good news for the Lions on the DeAndre Swift front is that he was limited in practice today. He's also listed as questionable with his ankle problem, but I think he will play Sunday against the Commanders. He's going to be key in this game, as is Jamal Williams for that. I think they can run the football. I do. I'm picking the Lions to win. I think the Lions are going to win. I think it's going to be let's be right on the number, 24-23, something like that. I think it's going to be close because that's what the Lions do. I don't think they're blowing anybody out. I think Washington's offense will do a little bit of damage. Again, I worry about Gibson and the receivers and everything else. But I think the Lions win. If the Lions lose this week and drop to 0-2, staring at the barrel of the Minnesota gun on the road next week, we're in trouble. Look, I didn't pick them to go to the playoffs. But you got to win these close games, and you've got to beat teams like the Commanders. Nobody has a great feel for this Washington team yet. Nobody's crowning Carson Wentz. I told you about McLaurin. All right, they've got some pieces. But Antonio Gibson is not a top 10 back. Carson Wentz is not a top 10 quarterback. Make a play at the end of the game. Make a good decision. No more onside kicks. Desperation. Get a stop or two. And I think the Lions can win this football game. They got to go into Minnesota at 1-1. Cannot be 0-2. Can't do it. All right, that's a Friday edition of Locked On Lions. We'll have an audio-only postcast on Sunday. Thanks for making us your first listen right here on Locked On Lions. We'll talk to you again on Sunday.